Hello friends, welcome to Charm Stories. Please subscribe to this channel and share the stories to others. By the way, to enable subtitles or captions, look for the CC icon on the video player. It will be located in the top right corner if subtitles are available. Now let's dive into the story. Victor strolled slowly down the brightly lit aisles of the supermarket, enjoying the quiet of the early morning. This was his favorite time to shop, avoiding the usual rush and bustle of the day. But today, something unusual caught his eye as he reached the fruit section. A young mother, Mary Jane, was struggling to calm her two small children while trying to balance a basket of groceries in her arms. The children were clearly tired and hungry, crying with tear-streaked faces, and Mary Jane looked overwhelmed, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and quiet desperation. Victor paused, watching from a short distance, feeling a sudden pang of empathy. He wasn't entirely sure why the scene moved him so deeply, but it stirred memories of times past, when he and Bianca, his late wife, would shop together, full of life and laughter. It was something about the look in Mary Jane's eyes, the way she seemed to carry the weight of the world, that touched him deeply. With a gentle resolve, he approached her, careful not to startle her. "Excuse me, do you need any help?" he asked, his voice soft and reassuring. Mary Jane looked up, surprised by the stranger's offer. She forced a small smile, though her eyes betrayed the stress she was under. "Oh, we're fine, just a bit tired," she replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face and trying to hold it together. Victor nodded, noticing her attempt to keep calm despite her children's cries. "It's hard, isn't it? Sometimes the day seems to start before we're even ready for it," he said with a gentle smile. "And kids, they always have so much energy, don't they?" Mary Jane chuckled, though it was a restrained laugh, one that hinted at the weight she was carrying. "Yes, they certainly do." The little ones clung to her, watching the exchange between their mother and the kind stranger with quiet curiosity. After a moment, Mary Jane led her children to the checkout, and Victor followed, keeping a respectful distance, but unable to shake the feeling that he needed to help somehow. At the checkout, Mary Jane started placing her items on the counter. Her children now calm but clinging to her, watching intently. The cashier scanned each item, and Victor noticed the way Mary Jane fidgeted with her wallet, glancing at the total on the screen as it grew higher. When the last item was scanned, she looked at the small amount of money in her hand, realizing it wasn't enough. With a quiet sigh, she whispered, "I need to put some things back." She hesitated, trying to decide which items to leave behind. But before she could remove anything, Victor stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "No, please, let me take care of this," he said with a warm smile. Mary Jane looked up, startled. "Oh no, I can't accept that, sir," she began, shaking her head. "Yes, you can. I insist," Victor replied, his voice kind but firm. "Consider it a small gift. We all go through tough days." Tears welled up in Mary Jane's eyes, and she quickly tried to blink them away, not wanting to break down in front of a stranger. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much," she murmured, glancing at her children, who were now looking at Victor with shy smiles of relief and admiration. Victor waved gently at the kids and gave Mary Jane an encouraging nod. "No need to thank me. Sometimes the smallest gestures can make the biggest difference," he said. As he paid for her groceries, he picked up his own items and gave her a slight wave goodbye. Mary Jane watched him leave, still in shock at the kindness she'd just experienced. Mary Jane stood there, holding her children close, still processing the kindness that had just unfolded. On his way home, Victor couldn't stop thinking about the young mother and her two small children. Something about that interaction left him feeling introspective, making him reflect on his own choices and the emptiness of his home since Bianca had passed. That big, quiet house now felt even lonelier. 5 days later, Victor was startled awake by the sound of the phone ringing on the small table next to his armchair. He had fallen asleep there the night before. With a groggy voice, he answered, expecting it to be a wrong number. "Hello, Mr. Victor?" The voice on the other end was soft, but carried an urgency that made Victor sit up straighter. "Yes, this is Victor. Who's calling?" "It's Mary Jane, the woman you helped at the supermarket. Remember?" There was hesitation in her voice, as if she felt embarrassed to be calling him. Victor's face softened as he remembered the young mother and her children. He had thought of her several times since that day, but had never expected to hear her voice again. "Of course, Mary Jane. How are you? Are the children doing okay?" he asked warmly. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a deep sigh. "I don't know where to begin. I just wanted to thank you again for what you did, but honestly, things have only gotten more difficult since then." Her voice trembled as if she was trying to hold back tears. Victor's heart tightened. He could only imagine the struggles a single mother like Mary Jane faced with 2 young children. "What happened?" he asked gently. We were evicted. I couldn't pay the rent," she admitted quietly. "We've been sleeping in the car. I didn't know who else to turn to, and I don't even know why I'm telling you this." Victor closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of her situation sink in. He knew what it felt like to be completely helpless, though in a different way. The loss of Bianca had left a void in his life, but the thought of a mother and her children sleeping in a car affected him deeply. "You did the right thing by calling me," he replied, a sense of determination in his voice. "If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know." "Oh, Mr. Victor, I can't ask for more. You've already done so much," Mary Jane whispered, almost ashamed. Victor began pacing, thinking hard about what he could do. Suddenly, an idea struck him, though it felt a little impulsive. "Listen, Mary Jane, I have a spare room here at my house. If you'd like, you and the kids can stay with me until things get better. It's not much, but it's certainly better than the car." There was a long silence on the other end, and Victor imagined Mary Jane weighing her options. He knew she didn't have many. I don't know what to say," she finally replied, her voice breaking. "I can't accept something like that. I don't want to be a burden." Victor chuckled softly. "A burden? Mary Jane, you wouldn't be a burden. I've lived alone for a long time, and it'd be nice to have some company around here. The kids need a safe place to sleep, and that alone makes it worth it." After a few moments, Mary Jane reluctantly agreed. "Okay, I'll accept, but only until I can get back on my feet. I promise we won't stay long." Victor smiled to himself. "Stay as long as you need. Come over whenever you're ready." "Thank you, Mr. Victor. I'll bring the kids over this afternoon," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Victor hung up the phone and stood for a moment, staring out the window. The sun was lighting up his garden, a place where he and Bianca had spent countless mornings together. Now, his home would be filled with new voices, laughter, and maybe even some crying. But somehow, he felt it was the right decision. Later that afternoon, Mary Jane arrived at Victor's house with her 2 children, Matthew and Bernard. They only had a few bags, containing the essentials they managed to save before being evicted. The children were a bit restless, but Victor could see a glimmer of relief in their eyes. He remembered how, as a child, his own home had been a place of safety, and he wanted to offer that same sense of security to Mary Jane and her family. Come in, come in." Victor greeted them warmly, holding the door open. Mary Jane smiled back, a little hesitant. Matthew, the older boy, clung to her hand tightly, while Bernard looked around with wide, curious eyes. Victor could tell how exhausted they all were, the toll of living in a car evident on their faces. "Thank you, Mr. Victor. I don't know how to thank you enough," Mary Jane said softly, as if afraid to disturb the peace of his home. Victor waved a hand, dismissing her worry. "Please, just call me Victor. And make yourselves at home. This house has more than enough space." He showed them to the room he had prepared. It was simple but comfortable, with a large bed for Mary Jane and an extra mattress on the floor for the boys. He'd even placed a few flowers and a vase on the bedside table, hoping to make it feel welcoming. This is so much better than the car," Mary Jane said, her voice thick with emotion as she looked around the room. "And safer too," Victor replied. "Now you have a place to rest properly." The boys ran to the bed, laughing, and for the first time, Victor saw a genuine smile on Mary Jane's face. It was a small moment of joy, but it meant the world to her. "If you need anything, just let me know," Victor said, turning to leave the room. "Victor?" Mary Jane called softly before he left. He stopped and looked back at her. I really don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice choked with gratitude. "This is so much more than I could have ever asked for." "You don't have to thank me, Mary Jane. I'm glad to help." He gave her a kind smile, though his eyes held a touch of sadness, as if remembering something or someone from his past.
Mary Jane noticed but didn't comment. She, too, knew what it felt like to carry a silent pain. And in that moment, she felt that she and Victor shared a deeper understanding. Two people who had suffered, yet were brought together by kindness. That night, after her boys, Matthew and Bernard, had finally fallen asleep, Mary Jane stepped quietly out of the room. She noticed Victor sitting alone in the garden, gazing up at the starry sky. She hesitated, unsure if she should interrupt him, but then decided to join him. "Is everything all right?" he asked gently, still looking up at the stars. "Yes, I just thought I'd keep you company." "If you don't mind," she replied, settling into the chair beside him. Victor smiled, appreciating the gesture. The garden, which he and Bianca had tended to for years, was at its most beautiful during this season. The flowers were in full bloom, and the scent of damp earth filled the air. Mary Jane admired the flowers and shrubs, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, taking in the colors and scents of the garden. "Do you take care of all this on your own?" "Yes, ever since Bianca passed." His tone was not bitter, just tinged with a quiet melancholy. "She loved this garden. We spent hours out here. Now, I tend to it for both of us." Mary Jane glanced at him, feeling the weight of his words. She knew all too well the kind of loneliness he was carrying, and despite her own struggles, she felt a wave of compassion for Victor. "It must be hard," she whispered. I'm so sorry." Victor shook his head gently. "Life is like that. It takes some things from us but gives us others in return." He looked over at her, offering a faint smile. "Like you and your boys. Maybe I needed company more than I realized." Mary Jane smiled back but soon grew serious. "Victor, I need to be honest with you about why we're in this situation. It's not just the eviction." She hesitated, gathering her courage. "I'm running from my ex-husband, Darian. He's a dangerous man, very controlling. When I tried to leave him, he made my life a living nightmare. That's why we lost our home. He made sure I had nowhere to go." Victor listened quietly, absorbing her revelation. He had sensed there was more to her story, but he hadn't expected something so dark. "I'm so sorry," Mary Jane continued, her voice thick with shame. "I didn't want to put you in danger. If he finds out we're here—" Victor interrupted gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You and the boys are safe here. I promise. Darian won't find you. I'll make sure of it." Mary Jane looked at him, surprised by the firmness in his voice. It was the first time in a long time she felt genuinely safe. "Thank you," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. Victor nodded, and in that moment, he knew his life was about to change in ways he hadn't imagined. In the days that followed, Victor's house became livelier with the presence of Mary Jane and her children. The laughter of Matthew and Bernard filled the once silent rooms, and Victor found himself smiling whenever he heard their giggles from the garden. He hadn't realized how much he missed this kind of energy until now. Mary Jane, feeling grateful for Victor's kindness, did her best to help around the house. She cooked meals, tidied up, and most importantly, tended to the garden Victor and Bianca had loved so much. Her gentle care for the plants didn't go unnoticed. "You have a gift for this," Victor remarked one morning, watching her as she planted new flowers in one of the beds. Mary Jane smiled, wiping a bit of dirt off her hands. "My mother used to say that plants can feel the love you put into them. I suppose it's one thing she taught me that stayed with me." Victor watched her in silence for a moment. There was something calming about her presence, as if caring for the garden was her way of quieting the pain of her past. "You tend to this garden like it's your own," he said softly. She looked at him, surprised, then smiled with a hint of sadness. "Maybe because, in a way, it feels like it is." She paused, gazing at the newly planted flowers. "Here with you and the boys, I feel like I'm starting to create something. Something real, something that can't be taken from me." Victor nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He felt the same. The loneliness that had haunted him since Bianca's passing was fading, replaced by a sense of purpose he thought he'd never feel again. But as the days went on, he couldn't shake the shadow that loomed over them, Darian. His threatening presence was still a ghost in Mary Jane's life, and Victor knew that sooner or later they would have to confront it. One quiet evening, while Victor was reading in the living room, Mary Jane joined him. The boys were already asleep, and the only sound was the gentle rustle of leaves outside. "Victor, I've been thinking," she began, her tone tentative. "About what?" He closed his book, giving her his full attention. "About Darian. I don't think we can stay here forever. He has resources, and he could eventually find us," she admitted, her voice tinged with fear. Victor sighed, knowing she was right. But he also knew Mary Jane and the boys had nowhere else to go. The thought of Darian finding them here filled him with dread. "We'll find a solution, Mary Jane. I promise to protect you, and that's exactly what I'll do," he said, his voice steady. "Maybe I can speak with a lawyer, see if there's any way to keep him legally away from you." Mary Jane looked at him, surprised by his determination. "You'd really do that for us?" she asked, tears glistening in her eyes. "Of course," he replied with a gentle smile. "I've never been one to stand by when I know I can do something." She lowered her head, fighting back tears. She was used to handling everything on her own, and the idea that someone was willing to help her selflessly was almost overwhelming. "I don't know how to thank you, Victor. You came into our lives when I had no hope left." Victor smiled back. "Sometimes life surprises us in ways we never expect. I've been alone for so long, and now, you've brought life back into this house. I think I'm the one who should be thanking you." Mary Jane returned his smile, but Victor could see the worry still lingering in her eyes. He knew comforting words were good, but action was better. The next day, Victor went into town to consult with a lawyer about Mary Jane's case. Meanwhile, Mary Jane stayed home with the boys, keeping them occupied in the garden. Victor knew that she was constantly on edge, always bracing for the worst, and he couldn't blame her. Darian was a real threat, and Victor was determined to make sure he couldn't get to them. When Victor returned home, he found Mary Jane sitting on the porch, looking lost in thought. "Any news?" she asked, not even turning to look at him. "Yes," he replied, taking a seat beside her. "The lawyer said we could file for a restraining order. It's not foolproof, but it would at least put a legal barrier between you and Darian." Mary Jane sighed, her face etched with worry. "Victor, you don't understand. Darian always gets what he wants. He has friends everywhere, people willing to help him find us. I don't want you getting too involved. If he finds out we're here, he'll come after you too." Victor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Mary Jane, I'm already involved. And I won't let him hurt you or the boys." Mary Jane looked down, processing his words. Victor's calm, steady tone made her feel a sense of security she hadn't felt in years. Though her fear of Darian still lingered, a spark of hope began to grow. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to escape his shadow. As days passed, life in Victor's house found a comfortable rhythm. Mary Jane and the boys were adjusting, and the sense of safety grew stronger each day. Yet, the threat of Darian never truly left Mary Jane's mind, a constant worry gnawing at her heart. Victor, on the other hand, was resolute, determined to protect them no matter the cost. But he knew things were far from over. One night, after the boys had gone to bed, Victor was in the kitchen, making tea, when he heard a faint knock at the door. He paused, glancing at the clock. Who could be visiting at this hour? He approached the door quietly, peeking out the window. He saw nothing, but then the knock came again, louder and more insistent. His heart pounded as he slowly opened the door. Standing in front of him was the last person he expected, Darian. The man was tall, with a sharp, intimidating gaze and a smirk that sent a chill down Victor's spine. "Can I help you?" Victor asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though he already knew the answer. "I believe you can," Darian replied, a cynical smile on his face. "I'm looking for my wife, Mary Jane, and my children. I know they're here." Victor felt the weight of those words, his heart sinking. Mary Jane had been right. Darian had found them. "I think you're mistaken," Victor replied, holding Damian's gaze firmly. "There's no one here running from anyone." Darian stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Let's not play games, old man. I know she's here. And if you think you can stop me from taking back what's mine, you're dead wrong." His voice was cold, each word like a threat. Victor took a deep breath, refusing to be intimidated. "Mary Jane isn't going anywhere with you, Darian. You've hurt her enough. She and the boys are safe here, and I won't allow you to ruin that." Damian's smile twisted into a grimace. "I thought you'd say that," he muttered, pulling an envelope from his jacket and thrusting it into Victor's hand. "Consider this your formal notice. I have more resources than you could ever imagine. This isn't going to end well for you." Victor opened the envelope with trembling hands, revealing a court summons. Darian was trying to gain full custody of the children, claiming Mary Jane was unfit to care for them. "I'll handle this in court," Victor replied, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Mary Jane has rights, and I'm sure a judge will see through you." Darian let out a dry laugh. "You're brave, I'll give you that. But you'll learn the hard way that people like me always get what we want." He turned to leave, throwing one last parting shot over his shoulder. "Give my regards to Mary Jane. She knows she can't hide from me." As Darian disappeared into the night, Victor stood at the door, feeling a deep sense of dread. He knew he had to act fast. Mary Jane was in real danger, and Damian's threat was far more serious than he had anticipated. Victor spent the rest of the night wide awake, thinking about his next move. Early the following morning, before Mary Jane woke, he drove into town to meet with a lawyer again. The lawyer was honest with him. Darian had considerable resources and might get a favorable ruling in court, especially if he claimed Mary Jane was fleeing without reason. "But what can we do?" Victor asked, frustration evident in his tone. "Mary Jane fled because he was abusive. Doesn't that count for anything?" The lawyer sighed, shaking his head. "We'd need concrete evidence, Victor. Her account might not be enough without proof. If Darian has good lawyers, and it seems he does, he could easily use the law against her." Victor returned home, discouraged but resolute. He would protect Mary Jane and the children, even if he didn't yet know how. When he walked into the kitchen, he found Mary Jane preparing breakfast. She smiled when she saw him, but Victor's face turned serious, knowing he couldn't keep Damian's visit a secret. "Mary Jane," he began, sitting down at the table. "Darian was here last night." Her smile faded instantly, her face going pale as she gripped the countertop. He found us," she whispered, her voice quivering. Victor nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "He knows where you are, Mary Jane. And he brought a court summons. He's trying to take the kids back." Mary Jane covered her face with her hands, her shoulders trembling as she fought back tears. "I knew he wouldn't give up. He always gets what he wants, Victor. I can't fight him. I don't have money or influence." Her voice was thick with despair. Victor placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Hey, look at me. We're not going to let this happen, okay? We're going to fight." The lawyer said we need evidence, something that shows the court who he really is. I know it feels impossible, but you're not alone in this. Mary Jane looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. I just want my kids to be safe, Victor. They're all I have. And you're not going to lose them, he replied firmly. Not while I'm here. Mary Jane nodded, trying to steady herself. But even as Victor reassured her, he knew that time was running out. Darian was a relentless man who wouldn't give up easily. Victor understood this was going to be the biggest challenge he'd ever faced. Victor spent the rest of the day reflecting on their next steps. He knew the battle with Darian would be more than just a legal fight. Darian was manipulative, powerful, and willing to use all his resources to regain control over Mary Jane and the children. Victor knew he had to come up with a plan to protect them and expose Darian's true character. That night, after the boys had gone to bed, Victor and Mary Jane sat together in the living room. A heavy silence hung between them as they both realized that everything was about to change. We need to do something quickly, Mary Jane began, her eyes fixed on the floor. Darian won't wait. He'll make life unbearable until he gets what he wants. I know, Victor replied thoughtfully. The lawyer said we need evidence, something to show he's unfit to care for the boys. But it's hard without witnesses or documentation. Mary Jane bit her lip, clearly deep in thought. She hesitated before speaking, her voice almost a whisper. Victor, there's something I never told anyone, she began, her words heavy with unease. When I was with Darian, he didn't just threaten me. He used recordings, videos, things he forced me to do. He keeps them as a way to control me. Victor's brow furrowed, feeling the gravity of her words. He looked at Mary Jane, who was visibly disturbed, but he also noticed something new in her expression, a spark of determination. If we could get those recordings, we could prove what he's done, she suggested, her voice steady but low. Darian would never want that to come to light. It would ruin his reputation. But if we had those records, we might finally be able to turn the tables on him. Victor stayed silent for a moment, absorbing the implications. Breaking into Darian's private space or gaining access to his files would be risky, but he knew that without evidence like this, they might not stand a chance in court. How can we do this? Victor finally asked, his voice calm but resolute. Mary Jane took a deep breath. I know where he keeps those things. When we were still together, he had a secret office in the house. That's where he stored everything he wanted to keep private. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. I don't have a key, but his assistant, Callus, might. Darian trusted him with everything. If we can convince Callus to help, we might get what we need. Victor nodded, realizing the stakes. Callus would be risking his job, maybe even his safety, by helping them. But Victor saw the desperation in Mary Jane's eyes and knew they had to try. It was now or never. Let's go after it, Victor said firmly. I'll find a way to talk to this Callus. We need that evidence, and we need it fast. Mary Jane looked at him, surprised by his determination. Though Victor was older, his courage and resolve were unwavering. She smiled, a small, hopeful smile. Thank you, Victor. I don't know how I would have managed this without you, she said, her voice thick with emotion, as she squeezed his hand for support. Don't worry, he replied, squeezing her hand back. We'll get through this together. In the days that followed, Victor began crafting a plan to approach Callus. Through some digging, he learned that Callus frequently visited a cafe in town, and Victor decided this would be his chance. With the lawyer's guidance, he prepared a strategy to appeal to Callus, hoping to show him that helping them might actually be a way out of Darian's grasp. The next afternoon, Victor entered the cafe, feeling a mix of tension and determination. He spotted Callus at a corner table, scrolling on his phone. Taking a deep breath, Victor approached him. Excuse me, you're Callus, right? Victor asked, standing in front of him. Callus looked up, surprised by the interruption. "Who's asking?" he replied, a wary tone in his voice. "My name is Victor. I'm a friend of Mary Jane's." "We need to talk," he said, keeping his voice low. At the mention of Mary Jane, Callus's eyes widened, and he glanced around nervously, clearly worried someone might see him talking to Victor. After a pause, he lowered his voice, leaning in. "What do you want?" Victor took a seat across from him, leaning forward slightly. "We know that Darian has kept evidence of the threats he made against Mary Jane, recordings, videos, documents. We need that evidence to protect her and her children," he said carefully, studying Callus's reaction. "We know you have access to that material." Callus's face went pale, and he shifted uncomfortably. It was clear he knew exactly what Victor was talking about, but he also understood how dangerous this could be. He was trapped by his loyalty to Darian, but fear flickered in his eyes. I can't do that," Callus whispered, avoiding Victor's gaze. "If Darian finds out, I'm finished." "Callus, listen," Victor said, his voice steady but persuasive. "If you keep helping Darian, you're only helping him continue his abuse. Mary Jane is running for her life and her children's safety. This is your chance to do the right thing. And let me tell you this, Darian will have no problem turning on you when it's convenient for him." Callus looked down, biting his lip, visibly torn. Victor could see the internal struggle on his face. I'll think about it," Callus finally said, his voice barely audible. "But I can't promise anything." Victor nodded, knowing this was the best he could hope for in the moment. "We don't have much time, Callus. Think quickly," he urged before standing up and leaving Callus to wrestle with his thoughts. The following days were filled with anxiety as Victor waited for a call that never came. Every morning, he felt a rising sense of dread, knowing the clock was ticking and Darian would not give up easily. Mary Jane sensed the tension as well, though she tried to keep a brave face, focusing on spending time with her boys and trying to create a sense of normalcy. But Victor could see the worry in her eyes. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Victor was sitting in the living room, reading, when the phone rang. He jumped, his heart racing. It was late, and few people would call at this hour. With a sense of foreboding, he picked up the receiver. "Victor speaking." "It's Callus," came a whisper on the other end. "We need to meet." Victor felt a rush of relief, but quickly noted the urgency in Callus's tone. "Where and when?" "Tomorrow, same cafe as before." "Come alone, please. I don't want anyone noticing," Callus replied quickly before hanging up. Victor held the phone for a moment, feeling a wave of both anxiety and hope. This meeting would be crucial. If Callus decided to help them, it could be the breakthrough they needed to protect Mary Jane and the boys. But he also knew the risk would be even higher. The next morning, Victor headed to the cafe, his mind racing with thoughts of what might unfold. When he entered, he spotted Callus in the same corner as before, sitting with his head down. Victor approached quietly, feeling the weight of the moment. "Callus," he said, taking a seat across from him. "Did you find anything?" Callus looked up, clearly nervous, but there was a determination in his eyes that Victor hadn't seen before. He took a deep breath before speaking. "Yes. I managed to get into Darian's office. It wasn't easy, but I was able to collect some of the recordings and documents he used to blackmail Mary Jane." He slid a small folder across the table toward Victor. Victor took the folder from Callus, feeling the physical and emotional weight of it. "Are these recordings enough to incriminate him?" he asked, his voice laced with urgency. Callus nodded, keeping his voice low. "Yes, Darian recorded everything to keep control over Mary Jane. There are direct threats, insults, even confessions about how he ruined her life. This should be enough to show what kind of man he is." Victor saw the fear in Callus's eyes and reached out to reassure him. "You did the right thing, Callus. Thanks to you, Mary Jane and the kids finally have a chance. We'll use this evidence carefully. Callis gave a slight nod, his face visibly shaken. Just keep my name out of it. Darian can be relentless. Victor nodded, understanding Callis's fear. He knew that once Darian discovered he'd lost control over Mary Jane, he wouldn't take it lightly. But in that moment, Victor felt a renewed sense of hope. He had the key to taking Darian down, and he knew he had to act fast. "I'll get this to the lawyer immediately," Victor said, rising from the table. "And we'll do everything we can to keep you safe." "Thank you, Callis." Callis nodded again, silently watching Victor leave the cafe. Clutching the folder tightly, Victor felt as if the tides were finally turning for Mary Jane and her children. But he also knew Darian wouldn't accept defeat easily. A final confrontation felt inevitable. Back at the house, Victor explained everything to Mary Jane, showing her the folder of evidence. As she held it in her hands, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and fear. I don't even know what to say," she whispered, her hands trembling. "Can this really save us?" Victor nodded confidently. "These recordings show Damien's true nature. We'll take them to the lawyer, and he can use them in court to ensure Darian loses all power over you and the kids." Mary Jane took a deep breath, clutching the folder to her chest. "You have no idea how much this means to me, Victor. For the first time, I feel like I might actually escape him." Victor placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "This isn't over yet. Darian will still try to fight, but now we're stronger. We're going to keep moving forward, and he won't be able to control you anymore." Mary Jane nodded, trying to hold back her tears. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. The next day, Victor and Mary Jane went to the lawyer's office with the evidence. The lawyer, surprised by the amount of material, immediately began strategizing for the upcoming court battle. With the recordings and documents in hand, Mary Jane finally had a fighting chance. But Darian was a formidable opponent, and Victor knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. Life at Victor's house grew tense as the hearing approached. Mary Jane did her best to stay calm for the boys, but Victor could see the constant fear in her eyes. Meanwhile, the lawyer was working tirelessly, but time felt like an enemy. Then, everything shifted. One morning, as Mary Jane was making breakfast, the phone rang. Victor, sitting at the table, felt his stomach drop at the sound. He had a feeling the call would bring troubling news. He picked up the phone, bracing himself. "Victor speaking." "Victor, it's the lawyer," came the voice on the other end. "Darian has filed an emergency custody request. He's claiming that Mary Jane is mentally unstable and is putting the children at risk. The court has scheduled a hearing for next week." Victor took a deep breath, struggling to contain his anger. Darian had made his move, shifting the battle to the legal arena where his influence and money could make all the difference. "Are we prepared?" Victor asked, gripping the phone tightly. "We have the recordings and documents as our main defense, but Darian is bringing in top-notch lawyers. It's going to be a tough fight. Prepare for the worst," the lawyer replied gravely. Victor thanked him and hung up, turning to face Mary Jane, who was standing nearby, watching him anxiously. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Darian is trying to get full custody of the children," Victor said, his tone serious. "We have 1 week until the hearing." Mary Jane's face paled, and she covered her mouth, fear flashing in her eyes. "He's going to take my kids. I know he will. He has money, power. What do I have?" Her voice cracked, nearly a whisper. Victor stood up, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Mary Jane, we're not going to let that happen. We have the evidence, and we have the truth on our side. Now, more than ever, we need to be strong for you and the kids. Darian won't win. Not this time." Mary Jane nodded, her face still reflecting her fear but finding comfort in Victor's words. The thought of losing her children was almost paralyzing, but Victor's determination gave her a sliver of hope. As the week progressed, tension filled Victor's house. Mary Jane lived in constant anxiety, knowing Darian could make a move at any moment. Then, on Thursday morning, just 2 days before the hearing, Victor was in the garden when a sleek black car pulled up in front of his house. The door opened, and Darian stepped out, an arrogant smirk on his face. Victor watched as Darian approached, his mind racing. He knew Darian was there to intimidate them, to remind them of his supposed power. "Victor," Darian said, his tone almost mocking. "Good to see you. I came to collect what's mine." Victor felt a surge of anger but kept his voice steady. "Mary Jane and the children aren't your property, Darian. They're safe here, and you're not taking them." Darian stepped closer, his expression hardening. "I'm not here to play games, old man. I know what you and that traitor did. You took my recordings, but it doesn't matter. In court next week, I'll make sure she never sees those boys again. And you made a very foolish choice getting involved." Victor glared at him, feeling the tension build. Darian was trying to unsettle them, to throw them off balance before the hearing. But Victor was resolute. "You don't have control anymore, Darian. The evidence we have will show who you really are." "Mary Jane isn't alone this time," Victor said, his voice strong and unwavering. Darian laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "I always have control, Victor. And in court, where money talks, you'll see exactly what I mean." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Don't underestimate what I'm capable of." Before Victor could respond, Mary Jane appeared in the doorway. Her eyes widened as she saw Darian standing there, his familiar, menacing smirk on his face. She instinctively took a step back. Darian noticed her reaction and smiled with satisfaction. "Ah, Mary Jane," he said mockingly. "Hiding here with this old man? You know this won't last, right? On Monday, you're coming back home, and the boys are coming with me. You've lost." Mary Jane stood frozen for a moment, but then something shifted within her. Victor noticed a new resolve in her eyes, a fire that had been missing before. "No, Darian, you've lost," she replied, her voice unwavering. "For the first time, you don't have control over me. And you'll see that in court." Darian's smug expression faltered, but he quickly masked it. "We'll see," he muttered before turning back toward his car. "See you on Monday. Enjoy your time with the kids while you can." Victor and Mary Jane stood in silence as Darian's car disappeared down the road. The weight of his threat still hung heavily, but something felt different now. Mary Jane was no longer the frightened woman she had been. She was ready to fight. Victor looked at her with admiration. "You were incredible, Mary Jane," he said, offering a proud smile. Mary Jane took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm done letting him intimidate me. I won't let Darian take my children, Victor. I'm ready to fight." On the morning of the hearing, tension filled the air. Victor, feeling the weight of responsibility, put on his suit with care. Mary Jane, calmer than she had been in days, was getting ready beside him. Matthew and Bernard, too young to understand the gravity of the situation, sensed something serious but stayed brave as they prepared to stay with a family friend during the hearing. Mary Jane knelt down, kissing each boy's forehead. "I'll be back before you know it," she said, forcing a reassuring smile. "Behave for our friend, okay?" "We will, Mommy," Matthew promised, holding his younger brother's hand tightly. Victor watched, his heart heavy. He knew that for Mary Jane, this was the most important battle of her life. Darian was relentless in his pursuit to take them away, and Victor feared what might happen if they lost. But he kept his calm exterior, knowing Mary Jane needed him to be her pillar of strength. At the courthouse, their lawyer met them at the entrance, his face serious but reassuring. "Are you ready?" he asked, shaking Victor's hand firmly. "Ready as we can be," Victor replied, masking his concerns. The lawyer nodded. "The judge is known for being fair, but Damian's team is powerful. It won't be easy, but with the evidence we have, we stand a real chance." Mary Jane listened, her gaze focused and determined. Damian was about to face a woman he'd never expected, strong, confident, and prepared to fight. As they entered the courtroom, Damian was already there with his high-profile legal team. He shot a cold glance at Mary Jane, but she ignored him, walking to the opposite side with her head held high. Victor could feel the tension building, every step and glance a prelude to the battle ahead. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Damian's allegations were ruthless. He claimed Mary Jane was mentally unstable, unfit to care for the children, and irresponsible. His lawyers exaggerated every detail, painting a distorted picture of neglect. With each accusation, Victor felt his anger rise, but he knew he had to keep calm for Mary Jane. When it was Mary Jane's turn to defend herself, her lawyer presented the recordings and documents that Callis had risked everything to obtain. The evidence was irrefutable. The recordings captured Damian's threats, his manipulation, and his admissions of deliberately making Mary Jane's life difficult. As the audio played in the courtroom, Victor watched Damian's confident expression crumble. His usual control faltered as the weight of his actions became public. "This evidence clearly shows Mr. Damian's abusive and manipulative behavior," Mary Jane's lawyer declared, looking directly at the judge. "It proves he is unfit to have custody of these children. Mary Jane has been a victim of years of psychological abuse, and she's fighting to protect her children from a cycle of control and fear." The judge, visibly affected by the evidence, looked at Damian with a stern expression. "Mr. Damian," he said gravely, "these recordings paint a disturbing picture. Your actions have not only undermined your wife's emotional stability but also show a complete disregard for the well-being of your children. I have serious concerns about your suitability as their guardian." Damian clenched his fists, attempting to maintain composure, but even his team seemed at a loss for words. The evidence spoke for itself, exposing the truth that Damian had worked so hard to hide. The hearing continued for hours, with every detail under scrutiny. Victor stayed close to Mary Jane, whispering words of encouragement when he saw her starting to feel overwhelmed. Her strength surprised everyone, including herself. For the first time, Mary Jane felt she wasn't alone. She had Victor, the lawyer, and most importantly, the truth on her side. Finally, the judge called for a brief recess to deliberate. The room was filled with a heavy silence as everyone waited for his decision. Mary Jane's hands trembled, but Victor held them firmly. "It's going to be okay," he said, looking into her eyes with confidence. "We've done everything we could. Now we just have to trust." Mary Jane nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She knew Victor was right, but the fear of losing her children weighed heavily on her heart. Closing her eyes, she tried to calm her mind, knowing that whatever came next was out of her hands. After what felt like an eternity, the judge returned to the courtroom. The silence was palpable as everyone took their seats, eyes fixed on the judge, waiting for his decision. He looked around the room, his gaze landing on Damian, then shifting to Mary Jane and Victor. "After reviewing the evidence and listening to the testimonies presented today, it is clear to me that Mr. Damian is not fit to have custody of these children," the judge began, his words causing a ripple of relief to pass through the courtroom. "Ms. Mary Jane has shown, even under extremely challenging circumstances, that she is capable and dedicated to protecting and caring for her children." Mary Jane let out a quiet, shaky breath, tears pooling in her eyes as she processed the judge's words. "Therefore," the judge continued, "I am granting full custody of the children to Ms. Mary Jane. Additionally, I am issuing a restraining order against Mr. Damian, prohibiting him from approaching or interfering in the lives of Ms. Mary Jane and her children." Mary Jane covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming freely down her face. Victor felt a profound sense of relief, as if the weight he'd carried for weeks had finally lifted from his shoulders. Meanwhile, Darian, furious, stood up abruptly. "This isn't over," he shouted, his voice echoing across the room. "I will appeal. You think you've won, but this is just the beginning." The judge looked at him with disdain. "Mr. Darian, I advise you to watch your words. If you continue this behavior, I may order a deeper investigation into your actions." Darian clenched his fists but knew he had lost. Victor and Mary Jane stood up together, ignoring Damian's threats as they left the courtroom. Outside, Mary Jane paused, taking a deep breath of fresh air, as if she were free for the first time in years. She turned to Victor, her eyes still brimming with tears. I don't even know how to thank you. You saved us," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Victor smiled softly. "I didn't do this alone, Mary Jane. You were stronger than any of us could have imagined. Now you're free." Mary Jane hugged Victor, and for the first time in a long while, she felt she could begin to live without fear. In the days following the hearing, life in Victor's house found a new rhythm. The court's decision brought Mary Jane a peace she hadn't felt in ages. Darian, with all his anger and influence, had been forced to step back, and Mary Jane could finally start rebuilding her life without the weight of his control. The boys, Matthew and Bernard, played joyfully in the garden, running among the flowers that Victor and Mary Jane had planted together. The sound of their laughter filled the air, and for a brief moment, the world felt harmonious again. Mary Jane watched them from the porch, her heart finally lighter. "They're happier than ever," Victor said, coming out of the house with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Mary Jane and sat beside her on the porch. "Yes, they really are," she replied, smiling as she watched her children play. "I never thought I'd reach this point. For so long, I felt trapped, with no way out." Victor took a sip of his coffee, reflecting on everything they'd been through together. From the moment he first saw Mary Jane at the supermarket, desperate and weighed down by her troubles, to this peaceful day, so much had changed. He had changed too. The loneliness he'd felt since Bianca's passing had been replaced by a new mission, a new purpose. "You were incredibly brave, Mary Jane," Victor said with a genuine smile. "No matter what Darian did, you stood firm and protected your children. That strength is what got you here." Mary Jane looked at Victor, her heart full of gratitude. He had provided not only a safe place but had become a father figure she never expected to find. His strength and compassion were the foundation that kept her going through the darkest moments. "I don't know how to express how grateful I am for everything you've done for us," Mary Jane said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do any of this, but you saved us." "I don't know how to thank you." Victor smiled, shaking his head. "You don't need to thank me. Sometimes life puts us in situations where we can help others. It's been a gift to have you here. You've brought light back into this house." Mary Jane smiled, moved, and for a moment, they both sat in silence, watching the boys run among the flowers. It was a scene of tranquility, a stark contrast to the months of fear and uncertainty. Now, there was peace and the feeling that the worst was behind them. In the following days, Mary Jane began to truly rebuild her life. With Victor's help, she found a job at a small flower shop in town, a perfect match for her love of plants. She and the boys continued to live in Victor's house, which had become more than a temporary shelter. It had turned into a real home. The boys also thrived in this safe environment. Matthew, the oldest, excelled in school, while Bernard, who had once been shy and anxious, started making friends and growing more confident. The shadows of trauma Darian had left on them began to fade. One afternoon, while Victor and Mary Jane were working in the garden, Bernard approached, holding something in his small hands. "Look, Grandpa Victor," Bernard said proudly, showing a tiny flower he had picked. I planted this here." Victor looked at the boy, his heart warming at the title of Grandpa, which Bernard had naturally started using. He smiled and gently took the flower. "You did a wonderful job, Bernard. This flower is as beautiful as the ones your mom takes care of." Bernard beamed with pride before running off to play with Matthew again. Mary Jane watched the scene, feeling a deep peace in her heart. Victor had become part of her family, someone she'd never expected to find but now couldn't imagine life without. "He adores you, you know," Mary Jane said with a soft laugh. "I don't think I've ever seen Bernard so attached to anyone like this." Victor smiled, watching the boy run around the garden. "And I love them. Those boys brought something into my life that I didn't know I needed." He paused, reflecting on what he was about to say. "Since Bianca passed, I thought I was meant to live alone, just memories to keep me company. But then you all came along, and I realized there's always something new to care for, something new to love." Mary Jane looked at Victor, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We needed you too, Victor. More than you could ever know." As time passed, Victor's house became a true sanctuary for Mary Jane and the boys. Damian never tried to contact them again. The restraining order and court ruling ensured he stayed away. Mary Jane knew she would still have to deal with some of the emotional scars left by her past, but now she had Victor's support and a network of friends who cared for her and her children. Victor, for his part, found a renewed sense of purpose. His garden, which had once been just a way to keep Bianca's memory alive, now flourished with the help of Mary Jane and the boys. Every new plant, every blossoming flower became a symbol of a fresh start and hope. And so, in the peace of that little garden, life moved forward, filled with hope and new possibilities. Victor, Mary Jane, Matthew, and Bernard formed an unlikely but deeply connected family, showing that even in the darkest times, love and kindness can grow and blossom where they are least expected. If you're still here, it means you're enjoying the story. Go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating tales like this. We'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.